So, Apple just dropped Apple Intelligence, and it's this huge promise of powerful AI that lives right there on your devices. But how? How do they actually manage to do that? Well, today we're going to go straight to the source. We're diving into Apple's own research paper to really pull back the curtain on the engineering. Let's see how Apple is trying to rewrite the rules of AI. And really, this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? For the longest time, we've been told that to get really powerful AI, you need these massive cloud servers and you have to feed them mountains of our personal data. Apple is basically saying, nope, there's another way. A path that gives you all that power, but with ironclad privacy. So how in the world did they solve this riddle? Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at what Apple Intelligence actually is. Then we'll dig into how they're building it from the ground up. After that, how do they make it so dang fast and efficient? Then, what does all this mean for the apps you use every day? And finally, we'll get to the big idea, the philosophy that's driving this whole thing. All right, so first things first, it's super important to get this. Apple Intelligence isn't just one single AI. Think of it more like a team of two, a really sophisticated tag team approach, where each one is designed to handle different kinds of tasks as efficiently as possible. So on one side, you've got the on-device model. You can think of this as your super fast personal assistant. It's a 3 billion parameter model, and parameters are kind of like the knobs and dials an AI uses to think, and it lives right there on your iPhone, built for pure speed. But then for the more complicated stuff, it calls in the bigger server model. This is like your powerful remote research team running in Apple's private cloud, ready for the really heavy lifting. Right, so how do you actually build these two different AI brains? This is where we get into the real secret sauce, the clever engineering tricks and the specific data they use that makes it all click. See, each model has its own unique design. The little on-device model does this clever thing where it shares something called a key value cache. So in simple terms, instead of every part of the AI needing its own separate scratchpad to work on, they all share from a common pool. That one trick slashes its memory needs. The bigger server model, though, uses this brand new design called a parallel track mixture of experts. Just imagine a really complex problem getting broken down and sent down multiple parallel assembly lines at the exact same time. It's a way to work on a ton of things at once, which just kills any delays. And what's the payoff for that new server design? Well, the number is frankly kind of staggering. It cuts down on the communication overhead, what the paper calls synchronization, by 87.5%. That is a huge leap in efficiency. It lets the model take on these massive problems without ever getting bogged down. Okay, so what's the fuel for these models? What are they actually learning from? Well, Apple says it's a mix of three things. Data they've specifically licensed, public open source datasets that anyone can access, and information their own web crawler, Applebot, gathers from the internet. After, and this is key, filtering out personal info and other junk. And this, right here, is where they draw a line in the sand. The paper says it directly, there's no ambiguity. Your personal data, your private messages, your photos, none of it is used to train these foundational models. They are building this intelligence without looking over your shoulder. But building the raw model, that's really just the beginning. After that, Apple puts it through this intense training and optimization process to make it smarter, faster, and efficient enough to actually live on your phone. This happens in two main stages. First, there's supervised fine-tuning, where they basically show the model tons of high-quality examples to learn from. Then, and this is the really interesting part, comes reinforcement learning from human feedback. It's exactly what it sounds like. Real people interact with the AI and they rate its answers, giving it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Over millions and millions of these little interactions, the AI learns what's actually helpful and what people really want. So the big question, how do you physically squeeze a 3 billion parameter model onto a phone? Well, you do it with some seriously aggressive compression. The on-device model's weights, the very core of its knowledge, are shrunk down to a teeny tiny 2 bits. But here's the part that I think is just wild. For the bigger server model, they actually repurposed a texture compression method that was originally designed for video games. It gets decoded directly by the Apple GPUs. It's just a brilliant example of taking an idea from a completely different field to solve a huge problem. Now, this incredible tech isn't just locked away for Apple's own apps. No way. They've built an entire framework so that any developer can tap into the power of that on-device model. And that means they can build smarter, more personalized experiences into the apps you already love. The star of the show for developers is this feature called guided generation. The best way to think about it is like a set of guardrails for the AI. It makes sure that when the AI generates text, it fits perfectly into the format an app needs. So if an app is asking for contact info, it gets a name, number, and address in the rate fields, not some random, messy paragraph. It makes the AI reliable, it makes it predictable, and for developers, that's everything. And the truly clever part? How simple they've made this. A developer literally adds just one line of code. That's it. From there, the system automatically figures out the prompt, and the operating system itself guarantees the output is perfect. This is that classic Apple vertical integration we always talk about, from the code to the model to the OS, making something incredibly complicated feel absolutely seamless. And it goes beyond just generating text. Developers can also use something called tool calling. This lets the AI actually interact with an app's specific functions. So for example, it could check your calendar, book a reservation directly in a restaurant app, or search for a product inside a shopping app, all by calling the tools the developer gives it access to. It basically turns the AI into a true assistant inside of any app. So finally, let's talk about the big picture. Because none of this technology was built in a vacuum. It's all guided by a really clear set of principles that Apple says are the foundation for their entire approach to AI. And here they are, 4 key principles that really boil down to 2 huge ideas, making AI that is both incredibly powerful and deeply responsible. It's about empowering users and representing them fairly, while also designing everything with care and underpinning the entire thing, protecting their privacy. These are the pillars that Apple says support every single decision they made. And look, Apple is really hammering this point home. These are not just talking points or marketing slogans. The paper actually details how these principles are woven right into the development process, from filtering the training data to train avoid stereotypes, all the way to building safety guardrails directly into the tools for developers. It is a genuine attempt to bake responsibility in from the ground up. So where does all this leave us? Apple has laid out its entire blueprint for an AI that's supposed to be deeply integrated into our lives, but in a way that truly respects our privacy. If they've really pulled it off, if they've solved that puzzle, then the real question isn't just about what Apple is going to do with this technology. The question is, what will we all create with it?